what's the POGO situation?
Well, too early to say, but I guess they're quite relieved about the recent developments with SE. And I think it's going to stop the exodus. I don't know if that means it's going to translate to growth in the sector, but at least it's going to stem much of the exodus that's happening right now.
When you talk about the exodus, how many of them have left? I mean, what sort of space are we talking about?
In our estimates, about 300,000 square meters. That's about 20% of what they occupy today. That's a lot of space.
Oh.
And they did that in just about 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So that's pretty intense vacancy for such a short span of time. And if this didn't happen, they would have probably contracted another 200, 300,000 square meters in the next 6 months. And that would be quite concerning.
Okay, so at least you've got some good news. Beyond the POGO, though, looking at the property market, is the worst over for real estate, David?
Is the worst over? I think so. I think so, because all our indicators from pre-sale activity of developers, and then most importantly, the sales of companies like Jollibee, Shakey's, and SSI have all been on an uptrend, including Maxis Group. They've all been on an uptrend since October, and they are about 20% away from pre-COVID levels. That's a very good indication of a recovery.
Okay.
And that's just two sectors. And then you've got domestic tourism already opening up. A lot of locals very eager to get out of the house, and you're seeing that in all tourism markets that have opened recently.
But when you look at the commercial space side, do you think the pandemic spelled the death of the central city? You know, the real estate model where you have the central business district at the heart?
No, I don't think so. I think the market will continue to hold on to office space. I think all the more now, companies are realizing that, okay, this work from home thing was a good experiment. We had to do it, but given the option, they will go back. They will go back to the office because they really need one thing that is missing that you cannot do online, which is the human collaboration when you are face to face. And the other thing is that the infrastructure projects that are coming online in the next 18 months. So, you know, it used to be 12 months, 12 new infrastructure projects in 12 months. That got delayed by COVID to about 18 months. That's going to introduce a new level of Philippines. You know, it will be a new Philippines when people go back to the streets and go back to office, because they will try these infrastructure projects that they never thought was going to happen or possible. And what we're going to see is that every 7 weeks, a new infra project is going to be completed, and that will make working through the city a totally new experience for many people.
I can actually agree. We just tried the Skyway Stage 3. It was really fast from Taguig all the way to QC. 7 minutes, David, just 7 minutes. Changes the whole experience. Okay, so
unthinkable.
Let's talk about all of these uncertainties with the vaccines, when we're going to get it, the effectiveness of the vaccines. How do you deal with that uncertainty when you think about investments in properties?
I think if there's one thing that this crisis taught us, is that real estate is the best asset. Because just imagine the stock market has contracted. What was that? 50%, 60% in the trough from pre-COVID to trough, and then today it's recovered about 80%. The economy contracted almost 10%, and yet property prices of most markets, most sectors have held. Worst case have held their ground, and in certain cases have appreciated. So just before Christmas, we transacted property in Bonifacio in BGC, core BGC, at what is today the record value for the Philippines.
Oh.
So even despite the worst times of COVID, the worst times of the economy, property prices in Bonifacio have increased from the last transaction pre-COVID, and that's a good sign. And if you look at most sectors, if whether you look at New Valley, you look at Ortigas Center, you look at Quezon City, they've pretty much held their ground. There are very few distressed sellers, and a lot of buyers, a lot of money looking for distressed capital, and there's actually very few deals to do.
Oh, okay. You mentioned how prices went up in BGC. By how much? How big?
12%.
Okay. Okay. And that's on average, year on year?
From the last transaction 18 months ago, there hasn't been a land transaction in Bonifacio in 2 years. So it's been up 12%. And considering the amount, considering the times, that's a very good achievement. And then if you look at the office sector, BGC prices in leasing have pretty much held their ground for new leases. And we're doing small deals, we're doing large transactions at almost record highs. Renewals are softer, but that's because of the collaboration between tenants and landlords to work together to come up with a reasonable renewal. But I'm very excited about the BPO sector. The BPO sector will continue to grow, especially this year, because this time of the year is when most global corporations have identified how much of the organization will survive this crisis. And once they know what the organization size is going to be like, they will then identify how much of that can be offshored to Philippines and India. And what happened in the US in the last 12 hours, with the state of the capital, it's just going to drive cost-cutting measures in most markets, and that will benefit Philippines and India. So I'm quite excited about that.
Okay. David, we crowdsourced some questions. A lot of our viewers were excited to have you today. So let me just share some questions. Ronald is asking, is now a good time to buy condominiums near schools like DLSU or ADMU, Ateneo?
Yes, I think the kids can't wait to go back to school, and that will save to more demand for dorms. The condominium space in the upper middle market and above have more or less held their ground. There are a few transactions that were distressed, but those are the minority of transactions. The majority of transactions have held their ground.
Okay.
And so I think the upper middle is good.
Okay, this is from Mr. Gonzalo Tiatuico. Are foreclosures by banks a good source for buying properties?
Depends, because if they're residential, they always have this very complicated 1-year extension, 1-year right to match. They usually will have inheritance problems or lawsuits, and sometimes sorting out those problems will make you miss the market. Sometimes. So it really depends on what you're buying.
Okay. Dom De Leon asks, rental pre-selling condo versus foreclosed properties. Which do you prefer?
Rental properties with no problems, that you can mobilize quickly, that you can generate income quickly, that you can borrow money against quickly.
Okay, and there's another question. How is the 2022 elections going to impact property?
It's going to be another source of funding for the Philippine economy, because it's going to introduce a significant amount of liquidity to benefit consumers. There's going to be a lot of spending happening now, but more so towards the year end, and even more so in the first quarter of next year.
Okay.
So in addition to all the infrastructure, the pump priming efforts of the Philippine government, all the foreign direct investors, the stock market benefits, you're going to have this other stimulus package, which is elections.
And final question, David, you seem very optimistic about this year. What keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? Fortunately, not Netflix and IG. It's how to position.
Okay.
And always asking ourselves, are we looking at things the right way? And fortunately, we've been proven mostly correct. And despite all the criticisms and all the flack I've been getting for being optimistic and looking at the glass always half full, it's holding, and we've been proven right most of the time.
Okay, and it looks like you're headed for another great year this year. David, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you soon in person.
Yes, thanks, Mimi.
Thank you.